Hey, welcome everyone to this special webcast where we're going to be dissecting what Cisco just introduced on Monday. If you're watching this on replay, this is Wednesday, March the 22nd. And back on Monday, March the 20th, Cisco introduced the brand new blueprint for the ENCOR exam. That's the core exam for CCNP Enterprise, and it's also what we would loosely refer to as the written exam for the CCIE Enterprise Infrastructure pre-qualification before you go take the lab. And there are some changes, and we'll detail in this webcast. And just to guess, it's going to run maybe 45 minutes to an hour, just so you can think about your schedule. But here's exactly what we're going to be covering. We're going to talk about the timing of this, what Cisco announced was going to happen, and what's really happening, and they don't perfectly line up. We'll check that out. We'll talk about for each of the different domains that we have in this exam, we'll see what has changed. And by changed, I mean they've reworded something. It's basically the same thing. They just clarified it a bit in the description. We'll also talk about anything that has been removed and anything that is brand new. What are some brand new topics? And there was no hint of those topics on the previous version of the blueprint. So we'll do that for each of the different domains in the ENCOR exam. And I'll save this as a surprise because we haven't told you what some of those new topics are yet. But I actually want to teach and demo some of the new content for you today so you can get a taste of some of the new stuff. I thought that would be really fun. And we'll do a couple of new topics. And then we'll talk about your next steps. Do you want to wait for the new certification exam to come out? Do you want to take it now? What's going to be your next steps? And I think you'll have a lot of clarity by the end of this webcast today. Hopefully in about an hour from now, you'll have a lot of your questions answered, and we'll do some Q&A at the end. But let's get started by talking about the timelines. And this was a little bit confusing, I thought. Back in December, Cisco released this. It's their certification roadmap showing how they're going to be rolling out these exam changes in the different tracks over the coming quarters. And Cisco's quarters, you can see them on screen, they have their Q1 is August through October, so it's not like January through March. But you can see that they've got a color code here. They're going to review an exam to see what sort of updates, if any, need to be made in one quarter they are showing. Then in blue, it says, okay, we'll announce, here's the new blueprint, which just happened on Monday. And then the green is, here's the new exam. And we'll talk about, is there an overlap? Can you still take the old exam while the new exam is out? Or is that not a thing? We'll get into that. But here's what's confusing. They told us back in December that we're going to publish this updated exam in 3 to 6 months after the exam blueprint was published. And that was published again on Monday. So it says from 3 to 6 months from now, we're going to be getting that new exam. And they predicted that that new exam would be announced, and it was, during Q3, February through April. So it was announced on March 20th. So they got that one perfect. But then if you look at Q4, May through July of 23, that's when they're saying that both the security track and the ENCOR track is going to be updated. And as we're about to see, that's not the case. Now, on the one hand, Cisco was accurate because they said you're going to have 3 to 6 months before we make the new exam go live. And that's true, by the way. But they said it's going to come out May through July. And that's not true. In fact, Cisco surprised me, and I think it's actually good news because a lot of people are well into their studies. Even if somebody started studying right now, I think most people could get ready for ENCOR if they started studying here in March. You've got 6 months to get ready for this exam. We're now minus 2 days. It's been 2 days since the announcement. But they announced on Monday that the new exam goes live on September the 20th. And that's the case not just for the core exam, it's also the case for all of the concentration exams. Remember how the CCNP Enterprise works now. It's only 2 exams to get your CCNP Enterprise cert. You take a core exam, which is ENCOR, the Enterprise Core, that's what it's short for, and then you get to pick a concentration exam. They've also all got new blueprints, and they even introduced a brand new one. But for the core exam, the concentration exam, even for the lab, the Enterprise Infrastructure Lab, it also gets updated on September the 20th. So for the Enterprise track in general, September the 20th, that's when the new exams hit. Can you still take the other exams for a brief period of time? No. The last day to test for the current exam is September the 19th. So one ends, one starts. There's no overlap, which is something Cisco used to do. They used to give us a little bit of overlap, but no, September 19th is the last day to take the current exam. September 20th, first day to take the new exam. And you might notice they've added a new concentration exam. I thought this was really interesting. It's called the ENCC. That stands for the Enterprise Designing and Implementing Cloud Connectivity. Since more and more companies are migrating their data centers out to the cloud, be it Microsoft Azure, Amazon AWS, or many other options out there, we need a way to connect to the cloud. That's one of the big hesitancies that a lot of companies have about migrating from their data center to the cloud. Got a lot of great economic benefits, but if you think about it now, we're dependent on the internet. Our data center access, the info, the data that makes our business work. If the internet goes down, we don't have access to that information if everything's in the cloud. So this course is all about not the cloud itself. This course is not about how to create Amazon S3 buckets or anything like that. No, this course is going to be about how you connect out to that cloud provider. You might do it via a VPN using IPsec. You might be using SD-WAN. So it's the connective tissue that gets you from your enterprise to whomever your cloud provider is. That's what that course is all about, and I am really anxious to grab a Cisco Press book when that comes out to learn more about that content myself. But that's when the new exam goes live, September 20th. So the great news is, if you think maybe you just passed your CCNA and you want to go take you want to go after ENCOR, personally, I wouldn't wait, because 6 months is a lot of time to sit on the sidelines when it comes to your certification career. I would always want to be doing something, and I don't know you personally. I don't know how quickly you prepare for an exam, but I think for the majority of people, 6 months, that's more than enough time. So I would encourage you to consider, if that was on your radar anyway, consider going ahead and getting certified this year. Prior to September 20th with the current exam blueprint. Now, let's go through what has changed. And if we look at the blueprints, they break all the topics down into different domains. So let's show you the weightings for these different domains, which is an area of technology that we're tested on. The first domain is architecture. And architecture is going to get into things like how you would wire up a data center, how you would wire up or how things in the enterprise might be interconnected. Quality of service, as an example. That's another technology that falls under architecture. Well, for both the old and the new, by the way, the current exam that I'm referring to as the old exam, still active. The current exam is version 1.0, 1.0 of the blueprint, and the new exam is version 1.1. But that weighting is not changed. Virtualization, here you're getting into things like Lisp and VXLANs and some other VLAN technology, VRFs. That is still at 10%. That didn't change. The big domain is infrastructure. That's where you're focused on things like OSPF and routing protocols, and that is at 30%. That did not change. It's the same weighting. Network assurance, where we're using things maybe like syslog or SNMP to monitor our network and different services that we might run on the network. Network assurance still at 10%, security still at 20%, and automation still at 15%. So none of the weightings changed. Cisco did not say, we're going to emphasize one domain more than another domain. So far, nothing has changed when it comes to the very high level overview. But let me give you, just for your perusing after class today, I don't want you to be distracted and be looking at these links during class, but I want to give you the links where you can go out instead of wading through Cisco's website. I just created some bit.ly shortcut links for you. If you want to take a look at the 1.0 blueprint, the one that's active today, go to bit.ly/350-401. That's the exam number. That's the current blueprint. I created a new, and I had that created years ago, but this morning I created a new one. This will get you to the version 1.1 exam. Go to bit.ly/ENCOR23. Remember, ENCOR is spelled without an E on the end of it. It's ENCOR, not ENCORE, but it's ENCOR 23. That'll get you, if you just want to take a screen cap of this or jot it down, that'll get you access to the new PDF. And let's go through each of these domains and talk about what has changed. And when I say what has changed, I'm talking about things that have been maybe reorganized or reworded or clarified. We'll talk about topics that are just gone, or we'll talk about topics that are brand new, and there are some of those topics that are just brand new. And I've tried to color code this for you to help it make sense, and I'll summarize all this at the end. But if I put something in that's sort of a goldish color, that's a topic where the wording has changed, the organization has changed, but basically it was on the old exam or the current exam. If something is in red, that's a brand new topic. That is a change. So that's my color coding for you. But what has changed when it comes to architecture? Well, a little bit of rewording here. So this is not a major change. When they're talking about enterprise design concepts, they added, in addition to two-tier and three-tier architecture, where we have the collapse core, and then we have the access, the distribution, and the core layers, the traditional model. They had fabric on there before, and now they say fabric and cloud. So they've added cloud. Now, this is interesting, because the way they used to word it, they said fabric capacity planning. And out of all the topics on the old ENCOR exam, when I would teach this, that was the weird one. That was the most bizarre topic to teach, because if you get into fabric capacity planning, you've got to know the specifications for a specific type of device. Like if you're dealing with a modular switch, a Nexus switch maybe that's going to be in a data center, in order to do capacity planning, you have to know the backplane throughput and the supervisor engine throughput, and what if you have one, or what if you... It was just oddly specific, and I don't think you had to know a lot about it for the exam, but it was on the blueprint. Now they've clarified it, and they said, well, know about fabric design. So here I'm thinking, okay, we need to know about the spine leaf architecture. And that's something that we already cover in the ENCOR curriculum. Now they added cloud. Now why did I not put that in red to say, hey, this is a new topic? Because cloud was already there in another bullet point. And I'll point that out to you. Something else that is just reworded a little bit. They said they changed no traditional WAN and SD-WAN solutions. They changed that to knowing the benefits and the limitations of SD-WAN. If I'm teaching the benefits and limitations of SD-WAN, I've got to compare it to what traditional WANs are. So that's not going to really affect how I teach that content. Also, they talk about the different switching mechanisms, the architecture inside of our routers and switches, like our CAM table, maybe the TCAM table, the how Cisco Express forwarding works. If you read this is what I did yesterday. I put these documents side by side and went bullet point by bullet point through them to see, is there any wording change at all? Here's the wording change on this one. They added, you got to know about adjacency tables. Well, I think that's a clarification because they already told us we need to know about Cisco Express Forwarding, and Cisco Express Forwarding uses two tables. In fact, let me get you involved here. Go ahead and chat it in if you would. What are the two databases, or the two tables, if you will, that's used by Cisco Express Forwarding? Can you just go ahead and chat that in to the YouTube chat? Well, I'll tell you one of them. It's adjacency tables. What I'm getting at is we already taught adjacency tables. As we were discussing Cisco Express Forwarding, we said, yeah, if you want to see information about the device that is layer 2 adjacent to you, and that adjacency table is going to show you your MAC address, and it's going to show you their MAC address, it's going to show you your egress interface. We already covered that. And the other table, and by the way, there's like a 15 or 20 second delay here, so I'm waiting for some of the responses to come in. But the other one was the FIB, FIB, the Forwarding Information Base. And Rolando, first one in with correct answer. Flash G, second with it. Yeah, a lot of people coming in with it now. But yeah, the FIB, the Forwarding Information Base. So again, some clarification, but still no change. Anything removed? Well, they took out the bullet about knowing the basics of cloud deployments, but they put it in that top one I talked about. So it was just a reorganization. So still no change that's really noted. Now, they did add something to architecture that is brand new. When they talk about wireless design, there were some different wireless considerations. This one is brand new. It's understanding client density. So as you're thinking about designing a network and you're putting in access points to cover all of your devices, you need to consider how many clients are going to be registering with an access point. What sort of applications are they using? Are they going to have high throughput? And you would need to make an access point decision. Do I need more access points with limited coverage so they can be tightly clustered together because I have a higher client density? Or am I covering a hallway that's not going to have a lot of clients in it at one time? So that is the first big change that we have. So that's one added topic, client density. Virtualization, things like Lisp that I mentioned, and VXLANs and VRF and VPNs, no change. It is word for word identical as you compare those two. So no change there. There are several things to talk about under the infrastructure domain, however. Under infrastructure, they added a couple of spanning tree protocol features. Now, before, we had to know about the basics of spanning tree protocol, just like we did back in CCNA. We needed to know in CCNA how to configure like per VLAN spanning tree plus, and we needed to know about rapid spanning tree. Well, now, in addition to configuring rapid spanning tree protocol and configuring multi-instance spanning tree protocol or multiple spanning trees protocol, depending on what literature you read, they added a couple of spanning tree security enhancements that were not on the previous blueprint. Those are root guard and BPDU guard. Now, root guard is where I've got a switch that's acting as my spanning tree root. Maybe I've got another switch that's going to be my backup root. And I don't expect anybody else in my topology to ever be elected as the root. If they are, something is suspicious. And this is a way to protect ourselves from a malicious user, a bad actor coming along, artificially lowering their bridge ID to try to be elected as the root bridge. It's going to stop them in their tracks. And BPDU guard is going to prevent somebody from trying to attach a switch to a port that's configured for port fast. So 2 new topics added there. Then another one, and this is a slight change. There was a topic that said we needed to not know all about EIGRP. We didn't have to know how to configure EIGRP. That was left for the NRC course. But we had to be able to compare the differences between EIGRP and OSPF. Well, when they talk about the differences, okay, they got a different distance, one's advanced distance vector, one's link state. How do they do load balancing? That varies because of the variance command with the EIGRP. How do they do path selections? How do they do metrics? But they added area types. Now you might say, okay, EIGRP doesn't do areas. What are we talking about there? Well, I'm having to try to read the tea leaves here and try to interpret what Cisco means in some of these cases. My guess is when they say area types, they're wanting us to know that there is such a thing as an EIGRP stub router. Now, I won't do a 20-minute discussion of EIGRP, but if you've worked with it a little bit, you might know that it can fail over to a backup router in case a primary path fails. We fail over from a successor path to a feasible successor path. And if we don't have a feasible successor, there still might be another path out there, but we have to go discover it. So we're going to send queries throughout the network. Now, routers sitting at the very end that don't connect to anybody else, there's no need to bother them with all these queries. So we can make them EIGRP stub routers. So my interpretation of this is we'll need to know about EIGRP stub routers. And we'll need to know about the area types of OSPF. OSPF has a stub area. It has a totally stubby area, a not so stubby area, and a totally not so stubby area. And so I will be wanting to add that content to the ENCOR course. So that is a new concept. They also, just a clarification, when they're saying configure and verify a simple OSPF deployment, they made the point of saying OSPF versions 2 and 3. Well, in my mind, that was already sort of implied, that we needed to know the basics of each version. So, yeah, they're just clarifying. Yeah, it's not just OSPF version 2, which routes for IP version 4. You also need to know about OSPF version 3, which is going to route for IP version 6. Another, just a clarification they made, is you need to be able to troubleshoot wireless LAN configuration. And when I teach this in our ENCOR course, I take you in to the console for the wireless LAN controller, and I show you how to get a free copy from Cisco. They give you a 60-day evaluation license, and you load it up on a VMware ESXi server, and you've got a full-blown console. And I would show you, I do show you in that class, how to go in and do some basic troubleshooting. How you look at the clean air report and all those things. Well, people that are really, really into wireless, they realize that they can secure shell in to the wireless LAN controller, and they can do a lot of stuff from the command line. They're just making the clarification here. Oh yeah, it's through the GUI. We don't need to use the command line. Well, I didn't think we had to use the command line anyway, so my treatment of that topic is not going to change. Let's continue with infrastructure updates. Something else that has changed, and this is a big change, they have added a time protocol. For a long time, we've been talking about NTP, the network time protocol, and we would talk about how we would set a stratum value, or we might make one router in our network go out to an atomic clock on the internet or some other time source at Google, learn the time, and that makes us a stratum 4 clock. Well, we'll then advertise time to all the devices in our network. And if one of those devices becomes a clock, it's going to be a stratum 5 clock. And NTP is fantastic for synchronizing time. And NTP is accurate to the millisecond level. What I think it's like a 10 millisecond variation it can have. I mean, it's really, really accurate for humans. But there are some systems that need hyper precise time. I was reading an article from the Facebook parent company Meta, and they were talking about how in order to really have all the virtual reality, all the things that the company Meta is wanting to do, they say that NTP is not enough. They need something more accurate. And the something more accurate that Meta is just one example. This can be used in stock trading. This could be used in like at a nuclear research. But the most recent article I read on this was from Meta, and it says they're going to be using the Precision Time Protocol, PTP. And I said that NTP was going to be accurate within milliseconds. Well, the Precision Time Protocol can be accurate within nanoseconds. That's literally 1,000,000 times more accurate, or 1,000,000 times, or you could take one NTP measurement and break it into different sub measurements. That's what PTP can give us. Just hyper precise time, not for humans, but for systems that need that. And the configuration is a bit more complex on a Cisco router. Not all Cisco routers support it. In fact, if you're doing stack, just as an example, if you're doing stack-wise, where maybe you've got a series of Cisco Catalyst switches stacked up, and you have that stack-wise cable interconnecting them, and you're treating it as one big chassis, you can outrun PTP because there's too much delay going over those stack-wise cables to get everything synchronized. I mean, it's that precise. But you just need to be able to interpret a configuration. Instead of having like an NTP master with a certain stratum level, they have, I don't want to get too much into this, but a router would get global positioning time from like a global positioning satellite. And that router could be designated as what's called the Grand Master. And then it can advertise time throughout our network. We can have routers that are transparent. We can have routers that are like edge routers, and there's a lot of options. The bottom line is they're not saying we have to configure it. We just need to be able to look at a configuration and say, oh yeah, router R1, it's the Grandmaster, and here we're doing this this edge-to-edge thing. So it's an interpretation of a configuration, but that is a brand new protocol that we've never been tested on before. Multicast added something. With multicast, and we taught multicast said, yeah, in addition to needing to know about the protocols like PIM, Protocol Independent Multicast, in IGMP versions 2 and 3, they added an RPF check. That's the reverse path forwarding check. Now, if you're familiar with multicast a little bit, if you're using dense mode, you know that initially the sender going out to the multicast group, they're just going to blast the multicast throughout the network. And then routers that don't want that or don't need that multicast, they can send prune messages to prune them off of those trees. But the bottom line is, initially, bam, it goes everywhere over all links, and we might have this poor router sitting here that needs the multicast traffic, and it's getting it from multiple directions. It's coming in on gig 0/1, it's coming in on gig 0/2. Who do we believe? Well, with reverse path forwarding, we say, well, who's sending us this? What's the video server maybe that's sending us this information? Let's say it's 10.1.1.1. What we do is say, well, if I looked at my IP routing table and I wanted to go to 10.1.1.1, which interface would I use? I would use gig 0/1. So that's the interface on which I will accept this multicast traffic. I'm going to drop it if it comes in other interfaces. That's RPF check, and that's a new topic. There was nothing really removed from the infrastructure area. And added, we did get policy-based routing added. Now, policy-based routing is something that was covered in a NARCI. That's like the Advanced Routing Concentration Exam. And it's still in the brand new, I checked this morning, the new NARCI blueprint has configure and verify policy-based routing. So we're not having to do configuration here in ENCOR, but we need to describe it. We need to understand what it does. So that's a new topic for ENCOR. Something else they added dealing with wireless is describe wireless segmentation. How can I logically group together my access points using different groups and profiles and tags? And that almost word for word is one of the topics on the CCIE Enterprise Infrastructure Lab that you need to know right now. So they brought that topic down from the lab to put it in ENCOR. Let's talk about network assurance. What has changed? Nothing. What has been removed? Well, this is one of those things where I think there's just a little bit of a clarification that was made. Let's see. Somebody said, Kevin, add COP also. The control plane policing? Nope. COP was on the old exam, and it's on the new exam as well. If that's what you're referring to. And but with this 4.2 topic, it was kind of redundant anyway. They got rid of configure and verify monitoring using syslog for remote logging. They got rid of that. But then there was already a topic, 4.1, that said be able to set up syslog. So it was in there twice. They just got rid of a redundancy. So I don't really see that as a big change. And there was nothing added. So basically, network assurance, no changes, in my opinion. Now, there is a little bit of change under security. This is sort of a clarification again, so I didn't make it in red. I made it sort of that gold color. The old blueprint says you want to be able to configure lines and password protection. This is where you would say, line VTY 015, log in, and then you would give a password. That would qualify for that. But in the next line, it's like, I guess 5.1b. I didn't write it down here, but in the current exam, version 1.0, they also say that we need to be able to do AAA authentication. And the way we would do AAA authentication would be setting up a local user. In global configuration mode, you would say, like, user, Kevin, password security level 015, whatever you want, and then the password. That's just what they're saying here. They just kind of reorganized it, but they really didn't add anything. They also reworded something that I would not consider a change. The old blueprint said you need to know EAP. That's extensible authentication protocols. So in our ENCOR training, what we're doing, or what we've done since we started teaching it, is we would walk you through the different EAPs. There's some EAPs used for tunnels, and we've got PEEP, and we've got LEAP, and there's like 4 or 5 of them that we go through, and they're used as part of 802.1x. Well, they changed they changed this bullet in the new exam to say 802.1x. Well, I'm going to teach that the same way, because 802.1x uses extensible authentication protocol to do 802.1x. So again, I would say no change there. Nothing is removed. And what was added, and this falls under the configure and verify. You have to always watch out for the verbs on these blueprints. Is it just something like describe or recognize or configure or verify? The different verbs tell you the level that you need to understand that topic. This falls under a configure and verify topic for wireless, but it's not really something you're going to configure. So it's, I would say this is more of a verification thing. But it's EAPOL, that is Extensible Authentication Protocol over LAN. And you've heard about the TCP three-way handshake. Well, when a wireless client authenticates with a wireless access point, it is using a four-way handshake. And my interpretation of this is we're going to need to understand what those 4 steps are. And if they gave us, for example, a Wireshark capture, we might need to be able to look through that and say, all right, here's what's happening with this handshake and this handshake and this handshake. There's really nothing to configure. Well, technically, you can go into your configuration console and you can add some extra descriptive information inside of one of those handshakes. But mainly, I think it's going to be verifying this operation. And you're going to need to know how EAPOL's four-way handshake works. And when it comes to automation, no change. So let's sum up. I've gone through a lot of bullets where I said, they didn't really change these. They reworded them, they clarified them, they reorganized them, they combined them, but not really a topic change. After I've gone through this line by line, I have identified 8 brand new topics that are on this exam. I have identified 0 topics that have been removed for the exam. So let's pause right there. This is great news. I've already had people messaging me saying, all right, I'm concerned that I'm going to start studying for ENCOR now, and I might not get done before the new exam comes out. Well, like I said, I think for most people, 6 months, that is sufficient time to prepare for the ENCOR exam, more than sufficient time. But even if it's not, everything you learned is applicable to the new exam. So the great news is, even if you're a slow study, you have very little time to study, you think it's going to take you 9 months or 10 months, still start now, because everything on the new exam or everything on the old exam, it shows up in some form on the new exam, plus 8 new topics which you can then learn. So here are those 8 different topics that we have. Number 1, wireless. We need to understand how the client density is going to impact our selection of access points. We also have a couple of spanning tree features that we didn't have before that we want to clarify, or that we want to be able to configure. We also need to know about those OSPF area types, the stub, the totally stubby, the not so stubby, the totally not so stubby, and I would say we would need to know what an EIGRP stub router is. And not necessarily configure, but describe PBR, policy-based routing. Also, how we're going to logically group a bunch of access points together and apply policies to those by using groups, profiles, and tags. And we have a brand new protocol to learn a little bit about, the Precision Time Protocol. They didn't say configure it, they said interpret a configuration. Describe the multicast RPF check. I think I pretty much fully described, I didn't show you a slide on it, but I described that one already for you today. Know about the EAPOL, four-way handshake, and that's it. In fact, let me back up and show you those again if you want to take a screenshot, because these are, in my opinion, it boils down to we've got 8 new things to learn and nothing to forget. So everything current is still going to be applicable in the new exam. And there we go. I'll leave that on the screen for a moment for you to get a screenshot. But these are the 8 things that we need to. These are the 8 things we need to learn. Now, I thought it would be fun, rather than just identifying these topics, I want to teach you a couple of these topics while we're here today. So maybe get rid of some of the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt about these topics. Before I jump into demo mode and start teaching some of this stuff, let's see if we have any questions. So if you've got questions, go ahead and chat those in. And by the way, there is a ton of conversations going on between one another right now, which I think is great. But if you have a question for me, can you just prefix your question with a few stars, like asterisks? That way, when I'm looking through this sea of questions on the YouTube chat, I know it's a question for me. So do that for me if you would, if you've got a question about any of this. And again, this came out Monday, and I poured over it thoroughly yesterday. But I admit, there might be something that I overlooked. I might have misinterpreted something. I might have missed something. So if you've got a question, I've got the blueprints quickly on hand. We can research it together. So we'll give just a few more seconds for any questions to come in. Let's see, are simlets in the exam? That's a great question. Well, Cisco doesn't really announce if there are simlets on the exam or not, and I won't speak from my personal experience. I will speak because I don't want to break any non-disclosure agreements, but I've heard chatter in the community that when the ENCOR exam first came out, there were no simulations. There was no configure this. And then I heard that now there is. You might be faced with 3 simulations. They didn't say one way or the other. Here's just my guess. If there are currently simulations on the exam, I would not be since they're not taking anything away, I wouldn't be surprised if they left those simulations on the exam. Let's see. Somebody's saying, what about a NARCE? Have you anything for those studying for a NARCE? We're going to be updating our NARCE course for sure, but the blueprint is out there. In fact, I think I created a shortcut for that one as well. Let me just do a quick double check here in the background. Just making sure I get this right. That's exam 300-410. Yeah, I'm going to paste this in to the chat. If you're not able to see it, it's bit.ly/300-410 V1-1 for version 1.1. But I just put that in the chat. If you go to that will give you the new NARCE blueprint. And I haven't done a line-by-line examination on there. I have read through it, and nothing is freaking me out about it. I think it's much like ENCOR. It's just a very incremental upgrade. What else do we have? Let's see. Please comment on the CCIE Enterprise Infrastructure Lab. I have barely looked through that one. I have looked through it. Again, there was nothing on there that I thought, whoa, I didn't see that coming. But I haven't analyzed every word of it like I have with ENCOR. So yeah, it would be premature for me to speak on that, I'm afraid. Let's see. When does the change take place? The last day to test for the current exam is September 19th. The new exam goes live September 20th. Do you think we'll need to buy a new ENCOR book, or should the current book be okay? I'm probably going to buy the new ENCOR book because I would just like to dig into those 8 new topics. But I think you could find information, and I might be publishing some of that information myself about some of those new topics. And you got 6 months. Let's see. It says Global Knowledge has ENCOR version 1.2. Is that different from version 1.1? I'm glad you mentioned that because that is a big point of confusion. If you go out to Cisco's website, you're looking at ENCOR and you see, literally, you can go out there, it'll say 1.0, 1.1, 1.2. What's going on here? Here's the deal. The core of the Cisco official course, not the exam, the course that's taught by Cisco learning providers, they have updated it over the years, just as I've updated the course that we teach. And the course that's authorized for Cisco learning partners to teach, that is version 1.2, but it is still addressing version 1.0 of the exam. I'm so glad you asked that because a lot of people get tripped up. They'll see ENCOR 1.2. What? We just got 1.1. Yeah, the 1.2, that's the version of the course, but it still addresses the 1.1 exam. Let's see. How about labs? Do you have labs with CML for NARCE? We bought your Udemy course. I just need more labs. Well, we do have labs for our NARCE course. Let's see. Let's see. Will you expand on the current ENCOR class with the new topics and add it to the owner's library? I will be making updates to those. I will be making updates to the current ENCOR course, and I've got some plans so that everybody's going to be really happy without having to go out and buy a new course. Cisco's coming out with so many changes so quickly. Yeah, I cannot justify saying, I know you just bought ENCOR a couple of months ago. Now you need to go buy the new one. So I've got another solution in the works for that. that I think is going to make you really happy, but I haven't announced it yet. I'm going to announce it early April, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, I'm not going to ask you to go buy a brand new ENCOR course for $3.99. Let's see. Is it advisable to study the ENCOR and a NARCE exams simultaneously? I would not. A NARCE goes, it's just like if you're studying CCNA, that lays a nice groundwork, and then you go deeper in ENCOR. And for some of the topics in ENCOR, like OSPF, like BGP, a NARCE goes deeper into those. I would do those independently, personally. Let's see. Okay, I think let's move on. I don't want to spend too much time doing the Q&A here. We can do this for hours, it looks like, with all the students or everybody we have attending. But I want to teach you some brand new content. How about that? One of the new topics was policy-based routing. And even though they gave the verb of describe policy-based routing, I think it's going to be easier to describe policy-based routing if you see it actually configured. So let me share with you the theory of policy-based routing, and then I'm going to set it up for you. I think you'll really enjoy this. Here's the way traditional routing works. You've got a packet coming into a router, and that router is going to check the layer 2 frame check sequence to make sure it's valid, it's not corrupt. And if it's not corrupt, what we're going to do is we're going to remove the layer 2 header. That exposes the layer 3 header, which has the destination layer 3 address. And based on the routing table, we're going to forward it out. So maybe the routing table, the fib as part of Ceph, it's going to say, all right, we're going to go at that top link, and off the packet goes. For different reasons, we might need to do a little bit of, I guess we could call it traffic engineering, maybe for security reasons, maybe for performance reasons. There are certain instances when one client is talking to a specific server, maybe we want them to take a different route. We could override that routing decision with the policy. That's what policy-based routing is all about. So here, with PBR, we still check the frame check sequence, checks out. We pop off the layer 2 header, revealing everything in between, like where we're underneath where we're going, but there is a policy that is applied to an interface using a route map, and we're going to follow those route map instructions. And we might go out a different direction. As an example, we might have a route map that is going to match an IP address based on an access list. Or we could do it based on the size of a packet. Maybe we wanted to treat big packets one way and small packets another way. Based on those matches, a route map is going to set a parameter. For example, if you match this IP address, then suddenly you're going to have this next hop IP address. Forget what the IP routing table says. You're going to go to this as your next hop IP address. Or maybe this is going to be your default interface to go out. Or I'm going to force you to go out of this interface. Or here's your default next hop. So we can influence next hop information based on the fact that you matched an access control list. Now here's the topology that I've got set up in my lab that I want to show you today live. Notice we've got a PC, and it's going to the server down at the bottom of the screen. The server has an IP address of 198.51.100.3. The PC has an IP address of 192.0.2.2. It's got two ways of getting there. It's going to go to R1, and it could go to either BB1, backbone 1, or BB2 to get to the server. You tell me, before we do this live, but notice the topology, look at it carefully. You tell me which router is it going to use when it goes from router R1. Is router R1 going to go to BB1, or is it going to go to BB2? Who's going to be the next top router from R1? Go ahead and chat in your answer if you would. I'll tell you this. I'm using OSPF as the routing protocol, and yes, I have altered the default reference bandwidth so OSPF can distinguish between a gig link and a 100 meg link, which it does not distinguish between by default. So who do you think we're going to be going to first? Terrence is suggesting BB2. Yeah, that seems to be the popular vote right now. A lot of people are saying BB2 because it's a gig link. It's going to have a lower OSPF cost to get down to BB2 as compared to BB1. So yeah, normally that packet is going to go to BB2 and then out to the server. However, let's say again, for security reasons, for performance reasons, for some reason, we want to force traffic going from that PC, going down to that server. We want to force it to go through router BB1 instead. So let's go out to the live interface and let's set that up. Let me bring up, I'll get my face off the screen and I'll bring up the topology so you can see it. And we're on the PC right now. And let's just see what our current path is. And we're going to be able to use the trace route command to do that. So from the PC, I'm going to say, I'll say trace route, and I'll give the IP address of the server. It's 198.51.100.3. And notice the first hop, that's R1. The next hop, that's BB2, as everybody predicted. Great job. 203.0.113.5. So if this is a .5, that's BB2. If this were .1, that would be BB1. And then finally, this is the server itself. Okay, let's use some policy-based routing to change that. Now, where do you think we should configure this policy-based routing? I suggest we do it on R1. It's the one making the decision about which way to go. So I'm going to go over to R1. We'll go into global configuration mode, and I'm going to create an access list that is going to match traffic that is going from the PC to the server. Nobody else is going to be affected. It's just traffic from the PC to the server. I'll say access list, and it has to be an extended access list because I'm specifying source and destination. By the way, on the ENCOR exam, you might be surprised as to how much you have to know about access control lists. You thought it was just for CCNA. You're really going to want to know it for ENCOR as well, just a side note. Permit, which in this case means match. I want to permit all IP traffic from the host of 192.0.2.2. That's the PC. And that's going to be going to 190. Let's see. I transposed those. Oh, no, I didn't. It's going to be going to a host. Let's see. It's going to be going to a host of 198.51.100.3. That's the server. Okay. Let's create a route map that's going to match that access list and then set the next hop. To do that, I'm going to say route-map, and I'll give it a descriptive name. A personal opinion here, I like to use all uppercase lettering when I'm creating a name for something. That way, when I'm looking through my config, I can look at that and say, oh, that's in all caps. That must be a name I made up. I'll say route map client 1 to server 1. And that puts me in route map configuration mode. It's here where I want to match the IP address of access list 100. Okay, what do I do to traffic that matches access list 100? I want to set, and again, context sensitive help shows us there's lots of stuff we could set, but I'm going to set the IP next hop address to BB1. Which is 203.0.113.1. And now I need to take that route map and apply it as a policy to my ingress interface. So I'm going to go into interface gig 0/1 where traffic is coming in to router R1 from the PC. And I'm going to say IP policy, we're going to use the route map that I named client 1 -to server 1. And I think we're done. Let's see if it works. Let's go back to the PC. And remember the last time I did this trace route, our next hop, or our second hop rather, it ended in a .5. That was BB2. If it ends in a .1, that's BB1. Look at that. It ended in a 1. So we overrode the OSPF routing table through policy-based routing. Now, for the ENCOR exam, you just need to be able to describe that. So you would need to know, for example, that you can override the routing table using PBR. You're going to do that with a route map. A route map is going to match something, and it's going to set something. And just maybe know examples like I just showed you of what that would look like. So that's one of the new topics. I said I would show you a couple of new topics on this on the new version exam. Since they're sort of related, I want to show you both. I want to show you two more. Let's take a look at some of those new spanning tree protocol enhancements, root guard and BPDU guard. First up, let's consider BPDU guard. Now, remember what a BPDU is. That's a bridge protocol data unit. That is what a switch configured for spanning tree protocol is going to be sending out. It's advertising things like its bridge ID, so it might or might not be elected as the root bridge. Pop quiz for you. Go ahead and chat this in if you would. Let's say that I walk up to a switch and there's an empty port on that switch. And that port is configured for spanning tree protocol. And let's say that I take my laptop and I plug into that port. I'm going to have to wait for a spanning tree delay by default. Can anybody tell me what that delay is? Think about this. Don't knee jerk and give me the number that first came to your mind. Think about it. I'm plugging the PC into an empty port. How long is it going to take for that port to go active? What do you think? Before it can start forwarding traffic. And again, I know there's a few second delay, so I'll wait for some of the responses to start coming in here. If I'm plugging into an empty port, how long is it going to take? Yeah, these are the two. I was expecting two responses, and I've got both of them. I was expecting 50 seconds, and I was expecting 30 seconds. The correct answer is 30 seconds. 50 seconds is how long it takes for a port that was in blocking to transition from blocking to listening to learning to forwarding. It goes 20 seconds in blocking, 15 seconds in listening, 15 seconds in learning, and then it goes to forwarding. However, that's if we were already in blocking and we had previously been receiving BPDUs. Well, here, if it's an empty port, we weren't receiving BPDUs. We'll just go through listening, learning, forwarding. 30 seconds, we're done. But the point is, we don't want a PC to have to wait through 30 seconds. So we turn on a feature called Port Fast. And this is where we're giving our solemn vow to the switch, and we're saying, Mr. and Mrs. Switch, I promise you I will not connect a switch to you on this port. I'll never form a loop. It's just for an end station. Please don't make me wait for 30 seconds. So we turn on Port Fast. What if we turn on Port Fast on a port and then one day that PC gets unplugged? They move somewhere else. And now we're needing to attach it to the switch and we say, hey, that's an empty port. Let's plug in there. So maybe even accidentally, we're going to plug in a switch to this other switch and we're plugging into a Port Fast port, which is going to bypass a spanning tree protocol. We don't want to form a loop, so what we want to do is turn on BPDU guard just on ports that are enabled for Port Fast. It's going to say, if I receive a BPDU in on this port enabled for Port Fast, then I'm going to go into an error disable state. So we won't have a loop. And we're going to stay in that state until we stop receiving those BPDUs. So let's say that switch 5, I plug it into switch 4, into gig 0/2, which is configured for Port Fast. Well, when I send a packet in, switch 4 says, whoa, I just got a BPDU come in on a port that was configured for Port Fast. So I'm going to go into this error disable state. How do we set this up? You can do it in a couple of ways. You can do it on individual ports that are configured for PortFast, or I think a great way of doing it is to do it globally, where you say, all right, everybody that's configured for PortFast, in addition to being configured for PortFast, I'm going to make you also enabled for BPDU Guard. So at the top of the screen, you see where it says we go into interface configuration mode, and we're saying spanning-tree BPDU Guard enable. Yeah, that'll turn it on for an interface, but if you want to turn it on globally for every port configured for PortFast, you can say in global configuration mode, spanning-tree PortFast BPDU Guard in default. And that'll turn it on for every port enabled for PortFast. The other one I wanted to show you how to set up and give you the theory of is root guard. With root guard, we don't want somebody to come on the network, artificially drop their bridge ID. Let's say that they drop their bridge priority from 32.768 to 13.384 in an attempt to gain control of the network, have people pointing to them as the root. If I have this topology where switch 1 is my primary root bridge, if it goes down, switch 2, it's going to be my secondary root bridge, but nobody else should be sending a BPDU that should make it the root bridge. In other words, I would not expect a superior BPDU to come in the bottom port of either of these switches, switch 1 or switch 2. But that's what root guard protects us from. It says if I receive a superior BPDU coming in, like on gig 0/2 on switch 1, something's up. Under no circumstances should I be receiving a superior BPDU coming in. So if it happens, I'm going to go into a root inconsistent state, and I'm going to stay in that state until those superior BPDUs were to stop. So how do we set this up? Pretty simple. You go into the interfaces on which you would never expect a superior BPDU to arrive. And you say in interface configuration mode, spanning-tree guard root. All right, I wanted to show you those new topics. Now, go ahead and start typing in your questions now, if you would, because there is that delay. And remember to preface it with those stars, those asterisks. And let's wrap up today by talking about your next steps. There are so many questions I've had over the past 2 or 3 days about, should I go for the current version? Should I wait for the new version? Hopefully, I've convinced you in this brief presentation that you're not wasting any time if you start studying now. Hopefully, you'll be done in 6 months and you'll have your ENCOR exam ready to rock and roll. Great. If you don't, life happens. You might have some sort of life event that makes it take longer. The great news is you've not wasted any time, because all the topics on the current exam are on the new exam. They just added a few more. So my suggestion for next step would be to go ahead and start, continue your studies if that's what you're doing, or to start studying right now for the current version of the ENCOR exam.